The clock on the microwave reads 6:42 in the morning. When I heard it, it was a sound that didn't belong. Not the gentle chorus of the finches that nested in the old oak. Not the whisper of the breeze through the pines, and not the constant soothing murmur of the creek at the edge of my property. This was a mechanical sound. A low, guttural growl punctuated by a metallic clank and the hydraulic sigh of heavy machinery. I stood at my kitchen window, coffee mug warming my hands, and watched. Two men in bright yellow vests were positioning a small backhoe near the creek bank, and standing beside them, arms crossed, pointing, was Brenda Millstone. She was the president of our homeowners association, a title she wore like a monarch's crown. In the 3 years since she had maneuvered her way into the position, she had become the self-appointed arbiter of neighborhood taste, decency, and compliance. Her reign had been one of beige paint swatches, meticulously measured lawn, heights, and fines for trash receptacles. Left out 31 minutes past the designated collection window, I had mostly stayed off her radar. I kept my property neat, paid my dues on time, and attended the annual meetings only to vote against whatever new restrictive covenant she was proposing. My life was quiet, and I intended to keep it that way, but now, she was on my land. But I watched for another minute as one of the men started the backhoe's engine again. The diesel rumble shattering the morning peace. He lowered the bucket toward the creek bank. The very bank my late wife Eleanor and I had spent a decade reinforcing with river stones and planting with native ferns. Brenda gestured emphatically, her silhouette sharp against the rising sun. She wanted them to dig. To dig into my property, to interfere with my creek. I set my coffee mug down on the counter with a quiet click. I didn't shout. I didn't run outside in a rage. I simply walked to the hall closet, retrieved the heavy-duty maglite I kept there, and slipped on a pair of sturdy work boots over my pajamas. Then I walked out the back door, across the damp grass of my lawn, and toward the creek. I stopped about 20 feet away from them, just inside my own property line, which I knew the precise location of to the inch. The backhoe operator saw me first. He paused, the bucket hovering over the water. Brenda turned, a look of annoyance flashing across her face, before being replaced by a practiced, condescending smile. "Arthur," she said, her voice carrying easily in the still air. "Good, you're awake. I was going to leave a note. I didn't say anything. I just stood there, holding the heavy flashlight at my side." My silence seemed to unnerve her more than any shouting match would have. "We're just doing a little community improvement project," she continued, her voice a little too bright. "The new pool is almost ready, but the contractors are quoting an astronomical price to truck in water. So we're implementing a more sustainable, eco-friendly solution. We're just going to divert a small amount from the creek here to fill it up. It's for the good of the whole community." I remained silent. I raised my phone, which I had brought with me, and began recording. The little red light was unobtrusive, but she saw it. Her smile tightened. "There's no need for that, Arthur. This is official HOA business. As president, I am authorized to utilize community assets for the betterment of the neighborhood." She took a step forward, crossing even further onto my land. "This creek," she said, waving a dismissive hand at the watercourse that had been the defining feature of this property for over a century, "is a community asset." That is when I spoke. My voice was low, calm, and absolutely devoid of emotion. "Brenda," I said, "get off my property." Her face hardened. The mask of the benevolent leader fell away, revealing the petty tyrant beneath. "This is an official HOA action. We have a right-of-way. This has been used by the community for years for drainage. It's historic use." She puffed out her chest. "Now, these men are on a schedule. You need to go back inside and let us work. If you interfere, I will have you fined for obstructing HOA operations, and if you persist, I will call the sheriff and have you cited for harassment. I took a slow, deliberate step forward, stopping directly at the invisible line I knew so well. You are trespassing. The men you have hired are trespassing. That machine, I said, nodding toward the backhoe, is trespassing. The creek is not a community asset. It is delineated on every single plat map for this subdivision as being entirely within the bounds of Lot 72. My lot. You have no right-of-way, no easement, and no authority here. She laughed. It was a short, sharp, ugly sound. Oh, Arthur, you and your little papers, we both know how things work in the real world. I am the president of this association. This is happening. Now, be a good neighbor and go have your coffee. She turned her back on me, a clear dismissal. All right, boys, she commanded the workers. Let's get that pump line trenched. The operator looked from her to me, a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. He was just a man doing a job he was hired for. He probably had no idea he was being ordered to commit a crime. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I simply said, Brenda, you have no idea what you're doing. She spun back around her face, a mask of indignation. I know exactly what I'm doing. I am ensuring this community has the amenities we all pay for. I just shook my head slowly. The video on my phone still recording her. Every word, her every gesture, her every trespass, she had no idea. She thought this was about a neighborhood pool. She thought this was about her authority as HOA president. She had no idea that what she had just done was declare war. Not on me, but on the State Water Resources Control Board, the County Planning Commission, and 50 years of established riparian rights law. She had no idea. She had just handed me the shovel to dig her own political grave. But before I tell you what I did next, I should probably explain. This wasn't the beginning of my story with Brenda Millstone. It was simply the end of the beginning. My name is Arthur Pendleton. I am 68 years old, and for 45 of those years, I worked as a civil engineer specializing in water resource management and hydrogeology. My entire professional life revolved around water. Where it comes from, where it goes, who has the right to use it, and what happens when you take it without permission. I have designed municipal water systems, testified as an expert witness in water rights disputes that were worth tens of millions of dollars. And I once spent 18 months mapping the aquifer system under 3 counties for a state environmental impact report. I am, to put it mildly, a man who understands water on a level that most people find excruciatingly boring. I retired 5 years ago, a year after my wife, Eleanor, passed away. We had bought this house, this specific lot, 30 years prior, precisely because of the creek. Eleanor loved it. She called it the soul of the property. For me, after she was gone, it became a living memorial to her. Its constant, steady flow was a comfort. My temperament has always been one of patience and meticulousness. In my line of work, you have to be. You can't guess about soil permeability or argue with the physics of fluid dynamics. You measure, calculate, document, and you verify. You build your case on a foundation of unassailable fact, because water, like truth, will always find the path of least resistance and expose any weakness in your structure. I am not a confrontational man. I believe in rules, in process, in the quiet, orderly function of systems. I find shouting to be a waste of energy and emotion to be a variable that complicates otherwise simple equations. Brenda Millstone, on the other hand, was all emotion and performance. She and her husband, a perpetually flustered car dealership manager named Tom, had moved into the neighborhood about 7 years ago. She was a force of nature, a whirlwind of social activity, and unsolicited opinions. She quickly joined the HOA board as the head of the Aesthetics Committee. And from there, her ascent was swift and ruthless. She leveraged minor disagreements into major feuds, created factions, and presented herself as the only person capable of restoring order to the chaos she herself had sown. 2 years later, the previous president, a mild-mannered accountant, resigned in exhaustion, and Brenda was elected on a platform of protecting our property values. Her tenure was a masterclass in petty tyranny. She instituted a rule requiring all visible garbage cans to be of a specific shade of taupe, available from only one online retailer at a 60% markup. She measured the distance between flowers in Mrs. Gable's prize-winning rose garden and fined her for non-uniform planting. She tried to ban children's bicycles from being left on driveways for more than an hour. Each new rule was accompanied by a flurry of newsletters filled with exclamation points and thinly veiled threats about liens and legal action. Many of my neighbors were afraid of her. They were busy people with jobs and families who didn't have the time or energy to fight a $200 fine over the color of their welcome mat. They just paid. They complied. It was easier. I understood, but I took a different approach. I complied on the surface, but I also documented. Every newsletter, every emailed notice, every threatening letter she sent was printed and filed. When she fined me $50 because a patch of clover had appeared in my front lawn, I didn't argue. I paid the fine by cashier's check, kept a copy, and tucked the official violation notice into a growing accordion file I labeled simply HOA. I kept the receipts. On paper, I was a compliant resident. In reality, I was building a case file on her administration, noting a clear pattern of arbitrary enforcement, overreach of authority, and actions taken without proper board votes as required by our bylaws. I wasn't planning to do anything with it. It was just an exercise of professional habit. You don't start a project without doing the preliminary survey work. The pool was her magnum opus. It was a project the neighborhood had debated for years. Brenda pushed it through with a combination of charm, bullying, and suspect financial projections. The cost ballooned almost immediately. The original plans called for the pool to be filled using a metered connection to the municipal water supply, a standard and legally required practice. But as I later discovered, the cost for that connection, plus the water itself, was far higher than her already strained budget could handle. So, she sought a creative solution. Her eyes fell on my creek. In her mind, it was just water, flowing uselessly away, a free resource waiting to be tapped for the community's benefit. The fact that it was on my property was a mere inconvenience, a technicality to be brushed aside by the force of her will and the authority of her office. She had no idea that the piece of paper she dismissed to me, DIJA, was a legally binding contract with the county and the state, and she had no idea that my water wasn't just mine. I held what are known as senior riparian rights, a legal status that came with the property, filed and recorded in 1958, grandfathered in before the subdivision was even built. That creek wasn't just a feature, it was a legally protected utility, and I had the paperwork to prove it. Back at the creek's edge, the standoff continued. Brenda, having given her order, refused to look at me. The backhoe operator, however, kept glancing my way. He was a young man, probably in his late 20s, and he looked deeply uncomfortable. He was caught between an angry client and a silent, staring homeowner. I focused on him, not her. I kept my voice even. "What is your name, son?" I asked. He hesitated. "Marco," he mumbled. "Marco," I said. "That woman has ordered you to perform an illegal water diversion and to excavate on private property without the owner's consent. I am the owner. I do not consent. If you put that bucket in the ground, your company will be liable for damages, and you will be party to a criminal trespass. I am recording this interaction. I am asking you on the record, to cease all work and remove your machine from my property. Brenda whirled around. You will do no such thing, Marco. I am paying your boss. This man is just a cranky old retiree with nothing better to do. The HOA will cover any legal issues. Now do your job. The sheer breathtaking arrogance of it was almost impressive. She casually indemnified a contractor for an illegal act she was commanding. She had no idea the HOA's own insurance would never cover a deliberately criminal act directed by the board president. She was writing checks with her mouth that the entire community would be forced to cash. Marco looked at his partner, who just shrugged. He was clearly out of his depth. He shut off the backhoe's engine. The sudden silence was profound. I think I need to call my boss, Marco said, pulling out his own phone. Fine, Brenda shrieked. Call him. I've already spoken to him. He knows this is an official HOA project. While Marco made his call, I walked back to my house. Brenda probably thought I was retreating, that I had given up. She probably felt a surge of triumph. I wasn't retreating, I was escalating. Not with volume, but with process. I went to my office, a room lined with bookshelves, filled with engineering texts and geological surveys. I sat at my desk and pulled out the HOA file. It was thick, meticulously organized with tab dividers. I went to the tab marked Property and Plats. There, under a protective plastic sheet, was a certified copy of my property deed and the official subdivision plat map, filed with the county recorder's office in 1973. I took out the map. With a highlighter, I traced the boundaries of Lot 72. Then I traced the blue line representing the creek, showing its entire course through the neighborhood, ran squarely within my property lines. There were no easements marked. None. Next, I went to the tab labeled Water Rights. I pulled out a document from the State Water Resources Control Board. It was a statement of water diversion and use. A document I had dutifully updated every 3 years, as required by law. It affirmed my pre-1914 riparian right to the creeks. Natural flow for domestic and agricultural use, specifically for irrigating the small orchard Eleanor had planted. It was an arcane but powerful piece of paper. It established a chain of title for the water itself that predated the existence of the HOA by more than half a century. I made a high-quality scan of both documents. Then I composed a simple, one-page letter. It was addressed to Brenda Millstone in her official capacity as HOA president, and carbon-copied to the other 4 members of the board. The letter was polite, professional, and utterly damning. It stated the facts, citing the specific parcel number of my property. It referenced the attached plat map as evidence of my property boundaries. It referenced the attached water rights statement as evidence of my legal right to the uninterrupted flow of the creek. It formally notified her that she, and any contractors acting under her direction, were trespassing. And it demanded the immediate cessation of all work and the removal of all equipment. And it concluded with a single, carefully worded sentence. Any failure to comply with this notice by noon today will be interpreted as a willful and intentional violation of my property rights and of the State Water Code, and I will be forced to pursue all available legal and administrative remedies without further notice. I printed 5 copies. I placed 1 copy along with the scanned attachments into a large manila envelope. This one was for Brenda. Then I prepared 4 more envelopes for the other board members. I would deliver them personally. Before I left, I made 1 phone call. It was to a man named Gene Kowalski. Gene had been my paralegal for the last 15 years of my career. He was a bulldog, a man who loved the dusty archives of county records offices more than most people love their own children. He was retired now, too, but he still did freelance work for a few old clients. "Gene," I said when he answered. "It's Arthur. Arthur, don't tell me you've found another unlined irrigation canal from the 1890 seconds. He chuckled. Something a little closer to home, I said. I explained the situation briefly and factually. The HOA. The backhoe, the creek. Gene was silent for a moment. Then he whistled, a low, impressed sound. Wow, that's not just stupid, that's ambitious. What do you need? I need you to go to work, I said. I want everything you can find on the HOA's pool project. Permits, contractor filings, board meeting minutes related to its approval, the geological reports they would have had to file for the excavation. I also want a full background on the president, Brenda Millstone, and the contracting company she hired. I have a feeling this isn't the first corner she's cut. I'm sending you my file on her as a starting point. I want you to build a fortress of paper, Gene. I want every I dotted, every T crossed. I want a timeline so detailed we can track her brand of coffee. Consider it done, Gene said, his voice alive with the thrill of the hunt. I'll start at the county planning department. This sounds like fun. When I hung up, I felt a familiar calm settle over me. The problem had been defined. The initial data had been collected. The work had begun. This was my world. This was a system, and Brenda Millstone was a foreign element causing a disruption. And I knew exactly how to flush the system. I walked out my front door, envelopes in hand. The backhoe was gone. Marco had apparently convinced his boss that digging on private property against the owner's direct orders was a bad business model. A small victory. But Brenda was still there, now talking on her phone, her back to me. She was pacing on the strip of grass by the sidewalk. I walked up to her. Brenda, I said. She turned her face tight with fury. You cost us a whole morning of work. I'm going to make sure you're billed for the crew's downtime. I held out the envelope. This is for you. It is a formal cease and desist notice. It contains copies of my deed, the plat map, and my state-registered water rights. It explains, in simple terms, the legal reality of the situation. I suggest you read it. I suggest you have the HOA's lawyer read it. She snatched the envelope from my hand. Without even looking at it, she ripped it in half, then in half again, and threw the pieces onto the grass. There's my response to your little papers, she spat. This isn't over, Arthur. You have no idea who you're dealing with. I looked at the torn pieces of the certified legal notice lying on the ground. Then I looked back at her. Oh, I think I do, I said softly. But you still have no idea who you're dealing with. I turned and walked away, leaving her fuming in my driveway. I didn't care that she had destroyed the letter. The act of serving it was the point. And I still had my video of her doing it. I still had the other 4 copies for the board members. Her little performance of defiance was just another piece of evidence. Another page in the file. I spent the rest of the morning delivering the other envelopes. I handed one to Frank, the board treasurer, as he was getting his mail. He looked at the torn letter in Brenda's driveway, and then at the pristine one, in his hand, a look of deep concern on his face. I left one for Sarah, a younger woman who worked from home, in her mail slot. The other 2 board members weren't home, so I sent their notices via certified mail from the post office that afternoon. Return receipt requested. I kept the receipts. By the end of the day, Gene had already started sending me digital files. The first one was the most telling. It was the HOA's permit application for the pool construction, filed with the county. And there it was. On page 4, section C, under water sourcing, the box for municipal system connection was checked. A handwritten addendum required for any project near a natural waterway stated explicitly, applicant agrees that no water will be drawn from or diverted from the natural creek, known as Willow Creek, located adjacent to APN 75-231-072. APN 75-231-072 was my assessor's parcel number, my property. Brenda had signed and dated that document. She had signed a legal attestation, under penalty of perjury, that she would not do the exact thing she had hired a backhoe to do that morning. She hadn't just trespassed on my property. She had violated the terms of her own permit. She was in breach of contract with the county. I saved the PDF to a new folder on my computer desktop. I named it the Millstone Project. It was going to get very full very quickly. The next 2 days were quiet. Too quiet. I knew Brenda was regrouping. Her strategy of brute force had failed, so now she would turn to her other weapon, manipulation of the rules and social pressure. On the third day, a notice appeared on the community bulletin board and was emailed to all residents. It announced an emergency board meeting to be held at the clubhouse in 2 days' time. The agenda item was listed as discussion and vote on remedial action for unauthorized interference with community improvement project. She was framing my defense of my own property as an act of sabotage against the community. It was a classic Brenda move: twist the narrative, paint the victim as the villain, and rally public opinion to her side before the facts could get in the way. Gene called me that afternoon. "You're not going to believe this," he said, his voice crackling with excitement. I went deeper. I pulled the geotechnical and soil reports submitted with the pool permit. They looked familiar. I ran a few keyword searches through my database of old projects. "And," I prompted. "It's a direct copy," Gene said. Word for word, data point for data point, of a report filed for a condo development in Northwood County in 2011. They just changed the cover sheet. The engineering firm that signed and stamped it, Millstone and Associates. It's run by her brother-in-law, Arthur. This isn't just a permit violation. This is fraud. They submitted a fraudulent geological survey to the county. This was the bombshell. This changed everything. Her brother-in-law had staked his professional license on a plagiarized document. This took the conflict out of the realm of HOA squabbles and into the jurisdiction of the State Board of Professional Engineers and potentially the district attorney's office. What did she think was going to happen? I asked, more to myself than to Gene. The sheer audacity was staggering. "People like her don't think," Gene replied. They assume no one is watching. They assume no one is going to check the paperwork. They assume everyone is either too scared or too stupid to look behind the curtain." She made a bad assumption. I said. "She's about to find out how bad," Gene said. "I've got a certified copy of the original 2011 report and the one they filed. Side by side. It's undeniable. What's our next move?" "We wait," I said. "She's called a meeting. She's going to try to make this a public spectacle. We'll let her. You and I are going to prepare a presentation. We are going to let her build her entire case in front of the whole neighborhood. We'll let her lie. We'll let her perform. And then, we're going to calmly and quietly dismantle it, piece by piece, with nothing but her own documents." The day before the meeting, Brenda made her next move. A sheriff's deputy appeared at my door. He was a young man, professional and polite. He handed me a thick envelope. It was a temporary restraining order. Brenda had filed it, claiming I was harassing her, that she was in fear for her safety, and that I was stalking her by delivering mail to her fellow board members. The order forbade me from coming within 100 yards of her. It was a transparently tactical move. She was trying to prevent me from attending the HOA meeting, where she planned to have me publicly censured and fined. She was using the legal system as a weapon, twisting a tool meant for protection into one of harassment. She had no idea how badly this would backfire, I thanked the deputy. I asked him for his name and badge number, which I wrote down. I asked him if his body camera was active. He confirmed it was. "For the record, deputy," I said, clearly, looking directly at the camera on his chest, "I have never threatened this woman, bots." The documents I delivered were legal notices pertaining to a property dispute. This restraining order is a frivolous and bad faith attempt to prevent me from attending a public meeting at which my property is the subject of discussion. It is an abuse of process. The deputy just nodded, his face impassive. "You'll have a chance to state your case at the hearing, sir. The date is on the summons." As soon as he left, I called Jean. I read him the restraining order. He started laughing. "Oh, she is a gift that just keeps on giving," he said. "This is perfect, an attempt to silence you. A judge is going to love this. We'll get it thrown out, of course, but not before we use it. Send me a scan." The next evening, I walked to the clubhouse. I stopped exactly 101 yards from the entrance, as measured by the GPS on my phone. Jean was waiting for me. He was carrying a heavy-looking briefcase. "Ready for the show?" he asked. "I just want it to be over, Jean," I said. "Honestly, almost there, Arthur. Almost there." He walked into the clubhouse on my behalf. The room, I was later told, was packed. Brenda's supporters were in the front rows, looking smug. Many other neighbors were there too, drawn by the drama. They looked nervous, uncertain. They had all received the email blast from Brenda painting me as a neighborhood menace. The meeting began. Brenda, in her capacity as president, called it to order. She then launched into a prepared speech. It was a masterpiece of performative victimhood. Her voice trembled as she spoke of her tireless efforts for the community. She painted a picture of a beautiful new pool, a jewel for the neighborhood, being held hostage by one selfish, uncooperative individual. She mentioned my threatening behavior, my constant watching, and the aggressive legal notices I had served. She announced that, for the safety of the community and the protection of its assets, she was proposing the board levy the maximum possible fine against me, $10,000 or for interference with an HOA project, and to place an immediate lien on my property for that amount. She then opened the floor for discussion, clearly expecting a chorus of approval from her allies. That's when Jean stood up. "Madam President," he said, his voice calm and clear, filling the room. "My name is Jean Kowalski. I am here as a representative for Mr. Arthur Pendleton, who is unable to attend this evening due to the temporary restraining order you filed against him yesterday, an order which I might add constitutes a clear abuse of the legal process designed to prevent him from speaking here tonight." A murmur went through the crowd. Brenda's face flushed. "This is a homeowners meeting. We don't allow outside lawyers." "I am not acting as his lawyer, ma'am. I am a resident of this state, and his designated proxy, which is permitted under your own bylaws. Article 7, Section 3. And I am not here to argue, mend. I am here to present a few documents to the board for their consideration before they vote on this proposed fine and lien. I trust the board is interested in making an informed decision based on all available facts." He had them trapped. Hacks. To refuse would be an admission that they didn't care about the facts. Frank, the treasurer, cleared his throat. "Go ahead, Mr. Kowalski. Present your information." Jean walked to the front of the room and set his briefcase on the table. He opened it and pulled out a series of large, foam-backed boards, the kind used for trial exhibits. He set the first one up on an easel he had brought with him. "Exhibit A," he said, his voice that of a seasoned lecturer. "This is a certified copy of the official subdivision plat map. On file with the county recorder, as you can all clearly see, Willow Creek runs entirely within the boundaries of Lot 72, the property owned by Mr. Pendleton. There are no notations for any HOA easement or community right-of-way. The community asset, you claim, Mr. Pendleton interfered with, exists, legally, on his private land. He paused, letting that sink in. He then placed a second board on the easel. Exhibit B. This is a copy of the pool construction permit your own board, filed with the county. I'd like to draw your attention to this highlighted section, which I will read aloud. Applicant agrees that no water will be drawn from, or diverted from, the natural creek known as Willow Creek. This document was signed by you, Madam President. The action you were proposing to fine Mr. Pendleton for interfering with was, in fact, an action that would have put this entire homeowners association in direct violation of its own county-approved permit. The room was getting very quiet. Brenda's supporters were shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Brenda herself was staring at the board, her expression turning to stone. But it gets worse, Gene said, his voice dropping slightly. He put up a third board. It showed 2 columns of text side by side. Exhibit C. On the right, we have the geological survey that was submitted with your pool application, stamped and signed by the firm Millstone and Associates. On the left, a survey filed in Northwood County 11 years ago. As you can see, they are identical. This was not a new survey, it was a copy. Submitting a fraudulent document to the county to obtain a permit is a serious offense, both for the engineer who signed it and for the applicant who filed it. Someone in the audience gasped. Frank, the treasurer, looked like he was going to be sick. He was looking at Brenda, his expression one of dawning horror. He was realizing the extent of the liability she had exposed them all to. So, to summarize, Gene said, turning to face the board directly, you are proposing to levy a $10,000 fine and place a lien on the property of a man for preventing you from committing an act of criminal trespass in order to facilitate a violation of your county permit, which you obtained under fraudulent pretenses. Any board member who votes in favor of this measure, now that these facts have been presented, could be held personally liable for malicious prosecution and slander of title. He let that hang in the air for a long moment. The silence was absolute. Then he reached back into his briefcase. I have one more item, he said. This one isn't for the board. It's for Mr. Tom Millstone. He looked directly at Brenda's husband, who was sitting in the front row. Tom, you manage a car dealership. Is that right? You must know a thing or two about financing. Gene pulled out a single sheet of paper. This is a preliminary estimate from the State Water Resources Control Board, WAD. The fine for an unpermitted diversion of water is $1,000 per day. The fine for environmental damage can run up to $5,000 per acre-foot of water diverted, and then there are the legal fees. You see, this isn't about a neighborhood squabble anymore. Your wife has picked a fight with the state of California. I just thought you should be aware of the financial exposure your family is facing before this goes any further. Brenda finally snapped. She leaped to her feet. This is an outrage. Lies, slander. This meeting is over, she shrieked, banging her gavel. But it was too late. The illusion of her authority was shattered. Sarah, the board member I had sent the notice to, stood up. No, Brenda, it's not over, she said, her voice shaking but firm. I move for a vote of no confidence in the president. Frank, the treasurer, immediately seconded the motion. The room erupted. The collapse was total and immediate. The vote of no confidence passed 4-1, with only Brenda voting against. She was stripped of her presidency on the spot. The proposed fine against me was, of course, never even put to a vote. The meeting ended in chaos, with Brenda storming out, her husband trailing nervously behind her. The aftermath was swift and brutal, but not for me. The very next day, the temporary restraining order was withdrawn by Brenda's lawyer. A week later, the new HOA board, with Sarah now acting as interim president, formally sent me a letter of apology on behalf of the entire community. They informed me that their legal counsel was reviewing all of Brenda's past actions, and that all fines she had levied over the past year were being suspended pending review. The State Water Resources Control Board did, in fact, open an investigation. They sent their own engineers out, who confirmed the attempted diversion. The HOA, under its new leadership, cooperated fully. They admitted fault, provided all of Jean's documentation, and threw Brenda under the bus, arguing correctly that she had acted unilaterally and against the HOA's own governing documents. The state levied a fine, but it was significantly reduced from the maximum due to the HOA's cooperation. It was still a painful 5-figure sum, which had to be paid via a special assessment on all homeowners. An assessment that was deeply unpopular and laid squarely at Brenda's feet. Her brother-in-law's engineering firm was investigated by the state licensing board for the fraudulent survey. He lost his license for 2 years and was fined heavily. The HOA's new board then filed a civil suit against Brenda Millstone personally to recoup the cost of the state fines and legal fees, arguing she had violated her fiduciary duty to the association. The last I heard, she and her husband were forced to sell their house to pay the settlement and their own legal bills. They moved away in the middle of the night. The community began to heal. The oppressive rules were slowly rolled back. The talc garbage can requirement was the first to go. Mrs. Gable's roses were safe. Mr. Henderson, the old man with the vegetable garden, came to my door with a basket of the most beautiful tomatoes I had ever seen. He told me he'd been on the original architectural committee and had the meeting minutes where the developer explicitly designated the creek as a protected natural space. He had been too afraid of Brenda to come forward. He became a good friend. The pool sat empty for a full season while the new board figured out a legal and affordable way to fill it. They eventually did it the right way with a proper municipal hookup. The kids in the neighborhood finally got their pool, and the whole ordeal became a cautionary tale whispered at block parties. A few weeks after it was all over, a package arrived for me. It was from Jean. Inside was a simple wooden frame. In it was the torn-up copy of the cease and desist letter I had served to Brenda, which Jean had painstakingly pieced back together. Underneath it, a small brass plate read, Exhibit D, Arrogance. I hung it on the wall in my office. I am sitting now on the small bench Eleanor and I built by the creek. The water flows as it always has, clear and steady. It is the sound of peace, of order restored. I never wanted this fight. I value my quiet life above all else. But I learned something through all of this. Rules and documents, the little papers that Brenda so casually dismissed, are not just ink on a page. They are the bedrock of a civil society. They are the quiet, unassuming guardians against the whims of tyrants, big and small. They are the framework that protects the creek from the pump, the garden from the measuring tape, the quiet man from the loud bully. You just have to have the patience to read them. And when necessary, the resolve to enforce them. The creek murmurs its agreement, on paper, and in fact, everything was finally back in its right and proper place.